As I said, my name is Rob Bucci. I am the VP of R&D here at Moz. And in that role, I get to work with some very smart, very passionate, and very talented people. I get to work with Brittany Miller, who just introduced me. And I get to work with Dr. Pete. And I get to work with Russ Jones. And together, we get to spend our time talking about big ideas and talking about the future of search and what we think about it. So I'm here today to talk to you about some of the things that we've been thinking about the future of search and what we're going to do about it. But before I do that, I need to take a moment and slow down for a little bit, and I want to address some concerns that those of you in the audience may have, something important. If any of you were at my talk in 2017, you probably left with the same concern that everyone left with. And over the past few years, people have approached me and asked me about that concern, and I've been guilty of being a little bit cagey in my response. And so I wanted to take this moment in front of all of you to finally address the concern that came out of my 2017 Mozcon talk, which was, when will Rob's mean husband finally let him get a kitty? If any of you were at the talk, you may remember me mentioning that my husband wouldn't let me have a kitty, but if I did have a kitty, I would love him forever, and I would hug him, and I would call him sandwiches. Well, I got good news. I'd like to introduce you to my tiny fur baby. He is 3 pounds. He's about 5 months old. He'll be like 5 pounds fully grown, which is hilarious because me and my husband together are like 500 pounds, and we're in love with this tiny 3-pound psychotic ball of fluff. He's amazing. And you may want to know, like, did you call him sandwiches like you said you would? No, I'm sorry, I didn't call him sandwiches. I was tempted, but based on his giant stature, we decided to call him Hercules. And you're probably wondering, Rob, is he perfect in every way? And the answer is yes, he is perfect in every way. This cat is like a denial of service attack on my brain. Every time I see him, I just want to like smush his little face. He's so cute. And it's troubling because I forget what I'm saying every time I look at him. And what were we talking about again? Search. I'm here to talk about search, not kittens. So when we think about the future of search, we think about like what we at Moz have to do in order to evolve ourselves and our products to be prepared for that future, right? And in 2019, when we've been thinking about the future of search, one of the things we've been talking about a lot is local. So here I am today to talk to you about what we're thinking about in regards to local search. We're going to start with the basics. What exactly is local SEO? Local SEO is the discipline of optimizing your business to be visible for a local audience, right? So that includes things like, yeah, optimizing your business's website, sure, absolutely, but it also includes managing your local listings. And the headache in managing local listings is addressed by Moz Local, which effectively solves that problem for the majority of local SEOs. But there's a whole other side to the problem that local SEOs face, and that is, how do you measure the performance of your website in hyper-local organic search? This is an area where traditionally, I believe that SEOs and marketers have been underserved in terms of the quality of the data they have and the tooling that they have available to them. So today, my goal is to talk to you about that side of the problem. We're going to push aside the whole local listings thing, and we're going to talk about the performance of your websites in organic search results. I'm just going to quickly open a bottle of water here as I dry up on stage. Pardon me. So, if you've ever heard me talk before, you've definitely heard me talk about SERP analytics. SERP analytics is the discipline of mining the SERP for things other than just the ranking of your website. It's about looking for all sorts of other opportunities on the SERP. It includes things like looking at share of voice charts. It includes aggregating queries together based on SERP intent. It includes looking for different featured snippet opportunities. All of these are elements of the SERP analytics practice. Now, local market analytics, I like to call it, is the discipline deployed at a hyper-local level. So local market analytics is all about mining SERPs in specific markets, looking for performance opportunities that are by nature hyper-local. So that's the lay of the land for what we're going to talk about today, and you're probably wondering what you're going to learn. Well, my number one goal is to convince you that the future of SERP analytics is all about local SERPs for the vast majority of queries that you care about. And when I say a local SERP, I mean a SERP that is seen by a searcher who is standing in a specific city or a specific zip code. So I'm going to talk about that data. I'm going to talk about how it's hard to get. I'm going to talk about how it's hard to process and mine. I'm also going to talk to you about some of the killer insights that you can drive if you were to have access to that data. Like any proud parent, I'm also going to talk about what we're doing at Moz in order to help solve those problems for people. Along the way, there will be kitten photos. He's very cute. just get into it. So, why is local market analytics important? Well, if we all agree that people turn to Google throughout their day to solve their problems, that's obvious, right? We can all agree that that's how people use Google. We can also agree that Google, in turn, in order to solve people's problems, pays attention to a lot of metadata about the search. Like, they pay attention, obviously, to what you search for, but also the data around the search. For example, the location of the searcher. And one thing we know is that Google will change the SERP based on a variety of different variables that they see. One of those variables is the location of the searcher. And I'm about to spend the next 10 slides convincing you of this, so just take it for a fact. We know Google changes the SERP based on the location of the searcher. So if all that is true, then we know that in order for a business to thrive and grow, it needs to be visible in the areas where its customers are searching for it. That's why local market analytics is important. It connects us as marketers, as local SEOs, to the data that represents the on-the-ground reality of where our searchers are searching from. Okay, another thing we need to agree on, another fact, is that everyone is using their mobile phone to Google all day long, right? We can all agree on that, that's a fact. Everyone's on their mobile phones and going to Google. The next fact that we have to agree on is that national SERPs don't actually exist. And I want to explain what I mean by national SERP. A national SERP is, well, if you go to your rank tracking or your SERP analytics tool, they allow you to track a query in a specific country. So for example, you can track a query like Adidas shoes in the United States. Now, in order to do that, what they do is when they go to Google to perform that search for you to retrieve that SERP, they pass some data to Google. They'll maybe pass the latitude, longitude that's somewhere randomly in the center of the United States, or instead of passing a latitude, longitude, they'll pass the phrase United States. And this will locate the search to United States. Now, the problem with this is that when we go to search Google, we're not saying to Google, hey, we're in the United States. Our phone is saying to Google, we're at the corner of 5th Avenue and Tupper Street. It's very, very specific as to where the search is coming from. And Google, in turn, is taking this signal and is building a SERP that is full of all sorts of content that is relevant to the specific location of the searcher. So it's in this way that looking at a national SERP is simply not as nuanced or precise an example of a SERP that your average searcher would see depending on where they're standing. And we have folks like Danny Sullivan who are acknowledging that the influence of location is far greater than the influence of personalization when it comes to explaining why the SERPs for a single query might be different between two different searchers. And across one data set of ours, of 1.2 million SERPs, we found that 73% of them contain some kind of localized feature, like local packs or other types of results. And we know that SERPs vary. Oh my God, I can't even look at them. We have to get through this. Okay, just gonna look out of the one eye, maybe I'll miss them. Anyway, so we know that SERPs vary for the same query in different markets. And in another data set, we saw that almost 25% of the sites we were tracking had some degree of variability between those markets. And what I mean by markets is like Seattle versus New York, Toronto versus Vancouver. And we know that within a market, SERPs can vary wildly. Our data shows that a site's rankings could vary across individual zip codes within a single market anywhere from 15 to 85%. So I'll headline that for you. That's what I'm saying is rankings can vary across markets, like Seattle versus New York, and they can also vary across individual zip codes within those markets, up to 85%. So you can be searching the same query as your friend who's on the other side of town, and he might see an 85% different SERP than you based on the data that we did in one study. So what we know is that the SERP that your searcher or your customer in Vancouver sees is not the same as the SERP your customer in Toronto sees. We know that SERPs change depending on where the search is coming from, even for queries without high local intent. Because when it comes to local intent, we expect the SERPs to change. They're sending a strong local signal. Obviously, the SERPs are going to be different from two different locations because it's based on location. Their need is bound by the location that they're in. But we're seeing this happen on SERPs without high local intent as well. He's sleeping on my husband's head. That's the tiny little face. Anyway, okay, so just to make things even more crazy, speaking of local intent, SERPs change for different kinds of local intent. So for example, searching in Seattle for sushi in Seattle versus sushi near me results in SERPs that have 68% different results on them. So that's kind of nuts, right? Like you're actually searching for the same thing, you're just phrasing it differently, and you're even standing in the same location as your peer, yet you're seeing different SERPs. So we're seeing a lot of change there, and this is a really big complexifier because now you have to be intentional about which specific combinations of query and location you want to optimize for. Were you to tweak the variables on either side of that equation, it will result in a different SERP. And the more queries and locations you care about, the more that challenge scales. So here's a SERP for the term furniture store in Seattle and New York. First thing that's really obvious is there are local packs. They're different. One is Seattle, one is New York, kind of rooted in Manhattan. But I want to point out that the organic results are different. The second place organic result in Seattle is Macy's. On New York, it's Yelp. In fact, they're both Yelp. So different local packs, different organic results. And here's Sushi Near Me in Seattle and New York. Again, yeah, local packs, whatever, but also the organic results are different. I believe it's like eater.com in Seattle and TripAdvisor in New York. And here's a SERP for the query, how to file small claims. First thing we note, no local packs. There are no local businesses that exist to service the specific need in these areas. But this is a very high local intent query because depending on where you live, the approach for filing a small claim against somebody is different. So it's bound by your location in that way. I love this example because it also shows how featured snippets can change for the same query between two markets. So in Seattle, we have one featured snippet. In New York, we have another. These are informational queries that are locally bound, and you can see those featured snippets change. So if you're in the featured snippet game and you're chasing those opportunities, but you're only tracking them nationally, depending on your query space, it's possible that you're missing opportunities. Even worse, it's possible that you're misreporting your performance. I also want to point out, people also ask box. It's the same between the two queries because it doesn't care about location. It only cares about the query itself. And then again, the organic results are different. Different organic results for Seattle versus New York. Now, if you came today already being the kind of SEO who cares about how your local pack results appear to the searchers that you care about, you already knew to expect that in the screenshots I just showed you, the local packs would vary between two locations. It's like the basic truth of local SEO. It's like table stakes. The local packs change depending on where the searcher is searching from. That's how they work. That's why they exist. But what I hope to convey for you in the past 3 screenshots is that a lot more changes than just the local listings. So if we accept that your local listings will change, your organic results will change, and even your featured snippets will change based on the searcher's location, it follows that in order to do a proper local market analytics practice, we need to be tracking in multiple zip codes for every market we care about, because we have proven that SERPs can vary across zip codes. In other words, if I'm in the greater Memphis area and I have 3 hardware stores, and I'm only tracking the term hardware store in one Memphis zip code, I'm missing what my searcher or my customer on the other side of town is seeing when he's looking for something that my business might solve for him. I don't have all the data because the SERP that he's seeing over there is different than what I'm seeing where I'm tracking. And this gets really, really hard, really, really quickly. You see, you have to, the number of markets that you care about and the number of queries that you care about scales up this challenge exponentially, right? And we call this multi-sampling, where you're looking at the same query in different zip codes, and then you're averaging together all that data, and from that you're actually driving your analysis. And that's a very challenging thing to do, but it's super powerful, because with that, you can provide all sorts of incredible insight. So I've talked a little bit about why this data is important. I've talked about how it's hard to get. It's a ton of data. It's hard to get. It's hard to store. It's hard to process. But if you can figure all that out, you can drive some really killer analysis. So I want to spend some time showing you some examples of that. For this talk, I put together a little data set. This data set is on petfinder.com. And this data viz that you're seeing here shows you the nationwide performance for petfinder.com for a tight set of 10 queries. These queries are things like adopt a cat, adopt a dog. There are no branded terms in this query set. And what I love about this is petfinder.com is not a local store. They have no brick and mortar locations. They're a pure online only play. Yet clearly, if you look at the map, their performance is influenced by the location of the search. So what we did here in order to get this map is that we tracked those 10 queries in the top 50 cities in the United States. And within those cities, we multi-sampled from up to 5 different zip codes. And then we averaged that data together, and then we use that to derive the average performance. And so you can instantly see that varying point performance in different areas across the United States. Look at Seattle, they're doing pretty good. Right a little bit more south in Portland, they're doing worse. So that variance between Portland and Seattle is interesting, and I wanted to dig into that. So the next thing I did was I segmented out all the data that had to do with just one query, adopt a cat. And what we're seeing here is that nationwide performance just for adopt a cat. Now, on doing a little more investigation, what I discovered was that it's actually the dog-related content that's driving down Pet Finder's performance in Portland. It's further proof of that adage that cats rule and dogs drool, because they're doing worse in Portland just in the dog queries, whenever something dog-related was used. And so if they were my client, really quickly I've gotten to a pretty good nugget of advice to give them. Hey, if you care about Portland, you should probably optimize your dog-related content because it's dragging down your average performance there based on the other queries that we're tracking for you. Now let's say for a second that we can know with certainty that Pet Finder really cares about Portland. Well, because we're multi-sampling from 5 zip codes there, we have the data to go even deeper. So here I'm showing you the 5 zip codes in Portland that we sampled the rankings from. And look at the variance. Like when I saw the data come in for this talk, I was blown away by the amount of variance I saw in the rankings from different zip codes, because Pet Finder is not like a local kind of business at all. And yet there's this incredible variance we're seeing, arranged from 3 to 7, which is significant. And I wanted to show you how, if you were so inclined, you could look at this data geospatially. You could look at it on a map. And you could like pinpoint the areas that you're sourcing your multi-sampling from. And were Pet Finder to be the kind of business that had local stores, we could overlay this information, we could look at demographic data and so on. You can be very precise with how you're sampling this information. It's just a matter of how complex you're willing to let it get for you. Now that's a lot about Pet Finder and how we're performing. Pardon me. But I also want to talk about everything else that's on the SERP, because there's a lot more information on the SERP than just Pet Finder's rankings. So one of the things that we can do is we can derive a national competitive profile for petfinder.com. And this is just a sample of that, right? It's not obviously the whole thing, and just a couple of sites I pulled out. So nationally, based on all that multi-sample data, petfinder.com is doing pretty good. We have Orphan Dog, we have Adopt a Pet, we have Pet Orphans, we have kittenlady.org, which is a domain that I'm really starting to relate to. I like come home from work and I pick Herc up and I like coo at him like a tiny baby and I rock him back and forth, and I'm fully on track to become a kitten lady, but I digress. So that was a national snapshot. This is the snapshot for North Carolina. So this is an interesting abstraction of our data, because in North Carolina we're actually tracking 2 markets. We're tracking Charlotte and Raleigh. I think I pronounced that right, Raleigh. Woo, yeah, okay, so we're tracking these 2 markets, and what I've done here is I've combined them together as an abstraction and I've pulled them out. So I'm able to like traverse through the data from really high level all the way down to individual markets, and within those markets, zip codes. And this is somewhere in between that. This is the statewide view. So North Carolina competitive profile, completely different lay of the land. CharlotteSPCA.com, number 1. CharlotteNC.gov, number 2. They're beating Pet Finder. So this is proof that for sites like Pet Finder, and all sites, they need to be specific about the markets they care about in order to truly understand who they're competing with, because these 2 are nowhere on the map when it comes to national profiles. You only discover those competitors once you get that granular. And that really is just the tip of the iceberg, because at this point, we know our performance, we know our competitive landscape. The natural progression is for us to try to find ways to beat those competitors, right? So instantly we start thinking about ways that we can find feature snippets that they don't have, or find markets to move to that they're not in. All of that is very valid, and I would love to spend time talking about that with you. We don't have time today. I do, because I can't resist, want to talk about one thing, which is imagine what you could do if we had local search volume data. This is something that I always wanted to bring to Stat. Never managed to do it because local search volume data at scale is very hard to get. But if you had it, you could do like incredible share of voice reporting that was super granular and nuanced. You could start like building a model that would prove the ROI of your SEO efforts in a market before you moved into that market, so you could use it to prioritize markets. Having local search volume just makes a lot of sense, because if you're tracking a keyword in Toronto, I want to know what the search volume is in Toronto, right? I'd be even better knowing what the search volume is in individual zip codes within Toronto if I could get it. I would take it if I can get it, but it's very hard to get. But if we had all this data, we could finally show up with some answers to some really interesting questions. Do my national SEO strategies have the same impact across my entire audience? Am I reaching some markets differently than others? Which market should I prioritize for my SEO efforts? Which queries should I optimize for in which markets? How does my query focus change market by market? Are there regional differences to consider? Do different query variants have different competitors in different markets? All of these are actually fairly difficult questions to answer that suddenly get easier if we have the data available in a way that we can query against it. So why don't more people do this? Well, one, it requires an immense amount of data. It really does. Not only to just collect, which is hard enough, but to store, to process, to pipeline, to parse. All that framework for doing the analysis is very hard. And once you have that framework, doing the actual analysis is hard because you're collecting the same SERP from different zip codes over and over and over, and keeping track of all that complexity is very difficult. It makes the analysis more challenging. And in many cases, the data just isn't available, i.e. local search volume. It's just hard to get. And at the end of the day, what everyone comes back to when I talk to them about this is, Rob, I'm an SEO. I'm not a data scientist. I don't have time to build the analytical engine for this. I don't work for a company that has a huge budget and untapped development resources. It doesn't exist, and that's all fair. And, well, you know that at Moz, our mission is to make SEO easier for everyone, right? So you're probably wondering, okay, Rob's talking about this, but what are they actually going to do about it? Well, I would love to explain that to you. You see, at Moz, we see really big opportunities in local search. And in the past year, we've doubled down on local search in a number of areas, some of which you've probably already heard of. For example, the Moz Local Update has new distribution partners, expanded features and analytics. It more fully allows marketers to own their online presence more than ever before. And yet it solves a portion of the local SEO problem. So what about all that major challenge with regards to collecting all that data and storing it and pipelining it and parsing it and multi-sampling and make sense of it? Like, who's gonna help me with that market level analysis that local market analytics would provide? What tooling exists to help me do this? Well, I mean, to be honest, we just went ahead and built it for you. So I'm really happy to tell you all about local market analytics. All the screenshots that I showed you in this presentation deck are actually product screenshots. All that data viz lifted directly from the product. It's launching as an add-on for Moz Pro, and it allows you to capture that on-the-ground reality of local search better than any product on the market. All that complex multi-sampling, this does it for you. So you pass in the keyword in the market, you get back hyperlocal SERPs. It then takes those hyperlocal SERPs and it uses them to weave together very intricate and nuanced market level insights that you can traverse through from high level to super granular, just the way I showed you in this talk. In fact, everything I've done in this talk is doable with this, all without wasting hundreds of hours doing it manually. The people who put this together are incredibly proud to share it with you today, because it represents some of the most some of the most accurate, precise, and nuanced local SEO and analytics data available on the market today. I'm not gonna spend a whole bunch of time showing you screenshots because I want you to come out at the Moz Hub and let us show it to you for yourselves, but I can't resist. So here's a quick snapshot of a dashboard of the performance for a specific keyword. This is cat adoption, and we're looking at that nationwide performance and then a bar chart showing the trend over time. Here are the SERP competitors for a specific keyword. This one is adopt a cat. And this is for all markets in the United States. But you can actually toggle into specific markets, so you can instantly pull up your competitive profile in varying markets. So if you're the kind of SEO who's looked at this data today and thought, man, how is local search impacting me? Like, how is the searcher's location impacting the performance of my site? This is the kind of tooling that's gonna help you answer that question. Here is the performance for a specific keyword. You see in that table down below, you can see how it ranks in different markets. And there's one thing I wanted to point out there. I don't know if anyone sees it, but it's local search volume. Moz has local search volume, which I'm unbelievably and irrationally excited about because it's something I always tried to get into stat, never managed to do it, and now we have it here in local market analytics as that add-on for Moz Pro. And soon it'll be available in other Moz products. You can expect to see it in stat. I'm really excited about the opportunities that it makes for all these kind of new analysis vectors. So, local market analytics, it's launching today. It's an invitation-only limited release. We're continuing to develop the functionality based on user feedback, so I and the team want you to use it, want you to tell us what you think about it, want you to give us that feedback so we can make it better. You can learn more and you can request an invite at mz.cm/LMA2019. I believe it's case sensitive, so just watch out for that. And I want you to come visit us at the Moz Hub. We're going to be there all through lunch, all through the rest of the show. And I and the people who worked on this functionality would love to show it to you. And that's it. Hercules hopes you enjoy Mozcon. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.